Hi there, I'm Kimberly Hirsh, a researcher, information consultant, and most importantly for this talk today, an expert learner. I am going to introduce you just briefly to the concept of learning in public on your blog. And I've got a URL at the top there, kimberlyhirsh.com/micro-camp-21, and I will be putting lots of notes and links and my slides there. So if this comes at you too quickly, you can always go there to check it out. So you have a blog. I have a blog, and this was the first post on the blog that I have way back when I started it in 2008. I started kimberlyhirsh.com, and I'd had other blogs before, but I knew that I wanted this one to be a little more professional, stuff that I wouldn't be embarrassed with people finding if they searched for me online. And I had no idea what to put on it. I just knew that I wanted one with my name, kimberlyhirsh.com, and I wasn't sure what to do next. So I spent a while trying to figure it out. What should I write about? And I still sometimes think about this, even now, as I'm posting on micro.blog. But here's the answer as far as I'm concerned whenever you don't know what to write about. Write about what you're learning. I first encountered this idea via Monica O'Brien's personal branding blog in 2009, just a few months after I launched kimberlyhirsh.com. And this helped me really think about what I wanted to share. So we're all learning all the time, but mostly we do it in private. This is an example of a time when I was learning in private. I'm sharing here a couple of pages from my bullet journal / notebook that I just do everything in. And when I write notes in my notebook, I'm the only one who sees them, and nobody else can learn from them, and nobody else knows what I've learned from them. But fortunately, we can share those things by putting them on our blog. So on my blog, for example, I have a research notebook that shares a lot of my research process and my reading notes. I think not these particular pages, which maybe I should go about fixing, but in general, I try to share a lot of what I've learned there. So now I'm telling you should do this, but it's like, why? Why does this matter? What value does it have? Why should I bother learning in public when I can learn in private? And that's a fair question. And I'll tell you the reasons that I think you should do it and the reasons that I do it. First of all, it's a great way to connect with other people who are interested in the same things as you are, especially in a place like micro.blog, where you've got a timeline and then the discover timeline with the tag emojis that people can use to indicate what they're talking about. People are likely to find you based on interests. And so if you include the relevant tag emoji in whatever you're learning about in either your post itself, if it's a shorter note, or in the title of the post, if it's a longer post, then people will be able to find you and connect with you about that. And for my money, that's kind of why I internet. Another reason is to build and demonstrate expertise. So other people will ask you for help. If you don't want anyone to ask you for help, this won't resonate with you as much. But especially if you want someone to ask you for help and you're hoping they will give you money in exchange for that help, then this is a great way to show your process of growth over time and how you have become an expert in something. And then finally, and this is honestly the thing I use it the most for, is to create reference material for your future self. I have a really hard time finding something in one of my notebooks, but I absolutely can find it in my blog. I just have to remember what I called the post and search for it, which is pretty straightforward for me. So how can you start doing it? Well, Shawn Wang, who is a developer and an angel investor who goes by the online handle Swix and also blogs at swix.io, has a suggestion. He suggests that you create learning exhaust, and I love this idea. So you're doing the thing you're learning, but around your learning, there's a bunch of other stuff you can create related to it. So you can write blogs about your learning process. You can create tutorials to help other people learn the same thing. And you can also create cheat sheets to just help people sort of get through things quickly. And this is a quote from his blog post about learning in public, which I will link on that page I mentioned earlier. Document what you did, and the problems you solved. That emphasis is added. That's mine. And he says to make the thing you wish you had found when you were learning. I just like this picture because it has exhaust and it's a Back to the Future reference. But I think making the thing you wish you had found when you were learning is a great way to learn in public. So you learned something and you've got all your notes from it. You might as well turn it around into something that you can share. So an example of a time when I did this is very early in my school librarian career. I had a parent object to one of the books in the collection in the middle school library where I was working. And I could not find one central location with clear information on how to handle this. So as I gathered information from a lot of different places and from talking to a lot of different people, I started to put together a toolkit to help other librarians go through this process. And now my American Library Association have revised theirs to be a little more comprehensive as well. And there are books about it now that there were not before. So it's my toolkit is like one in now a suite of things that people have, which is great. I don't know if it influenced the creation of those other things, but I like to imagine it did. And Austin Kleon wrote a whole book. So if you're like, I don't know how to do this, you should read this book. Show Your Work, 10 Ways to Share Your Creativity and Get Discovered by Austin Kleon. It is one of my favorite books. I reread this trilogy that it's part of, the Steal Like an Artist trilogy, about once a year. I'm about to begin my 2021 reread of this series. And he's got a great quote specifically about this. He says, the best way to get started on the path to sharing your work is to think about what you want to learn and make a commitment to learning it in front of others. So, what do you want to learn? What are the things you could write about that you're learning? I have a few pretty straightforward categories that I've divided these into, but I'm sure as you think about it, you'll come up with lots more possibilities. If you're a student, you can write about school. So I just finished my PhD in May, and during that time, I wrote this start to finish literature review workflow, which I have to tell you is a great example of one of the ways your blog can serve as a reference for your future self, because every time I need to do anything related to a lit review now, I go back to this post because I cannot remember how to do it. I can, but it'll be fragmentary, and in this way I can look at that and it's really well organized. And then just another example of writing about my dissertation process. And I have a lot of posts about the different phases of that process. And if you're a student, you can write about something in your class, you can write about assignments, you can write about extracurricular activities. There are all kinds of things to write about if you're a student. What if you're not a student? Well, you probably work on something. Even if you do not have traditional employment, I bet you expend energy to make something happen in the world, and you can write about that. This is an example of a post I wrote as part of discussing the research we were doing at the Equity in the Making Lab at UNC Chapel Hill. And as we were designing our research instruments, and specifically this interview guide where we had to create our questions, we really had to think about how to navigate not asking too specific questions, not taking a really long time because we promised these interviews would only be about 30 minutes long, but at the same time, really making sure we got answers to the kinds of research questions we wanted to address. And so I wrote a blog post about that process and how we navigated that. And you can write about hobbies. This is actually my favorite thing to write about because I think it's the most fun. So I just wrote really recently a post about what I learned from sewing napkins. Sewing napkins is a really straightforward project. It is not elaborate, but I learned a lot from it, even though it is like the most basic, straightforward sewing project you can do. And then I have an example here from about 7 years ago where I was actually taking a formal class about improv, and I started writing up my notes for that. And I did that for that first class. I did it just about every week. And over time, I started to do it in a less time-bound way and more conceptual way. So I would notice things from across my different classes and then would write notes about that and post them on my website. So I've convinced you, let's say. Let's just assume I've convinced you that you should do this. What now? It's actually pretty easy. 1, learn something. 2, blog about it. And then 3, tell me, because I love reading about what other people are learning. And I don't know. I love learning. Learning is my favorite thing. And I like when other people are excited about what they're learning. So you can find me on microblog at micro.blog at Kimberly Hirsh, or you can email me at hello@kimberlyhirsh.com. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking to you about this more in the chat.